Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Dan. Today I thought I would talk about a story that is germinating in my mind for a novel called Geist, which would be a Dryden Universe novel. And I would talk you through what I'm doing in the initial throes of this project. You can see I'll talk a lot about dialogue and how I'm doing my dialogue tagging. I'll talk a little bit about some of the exposition in the story as well, because this would be the first chapter in theory of a novel. Although at this point, this is really what I call a laissez-faire type of writing process. It's very creative. There's not, I don't have this story plotted out. I have an idea in my mind, and I'm jotting down a bit to see if that idea has any worth. It's kind of where I'm at. But because it's a Dryden Universe novel, I have to have consistency between my books. So the Geist Marines, if you've read Origins, originated in that book. There's a story called Threshold, and then of course the Geist Marines show up in Akuta, I believe. I don't think they show up. I think they're mentioned in A Step Too Far, but I don't think they show up. But because it's a single world, I have to have some other documents open. So on the left side here, I've got, this was my character people, places, and thing list when I wrote Threshold. You can see it has an old title on it. But I want to make sure I go back for consistency, and I'm looking at things like the engines, the armaments that people have, the small arms. Like I know the K&R flechette rifles show up in at least 2 other books, and the Ram 592 shows up in Akuta. So I have to draw those all those elements in because it's a Dryden Universe weapon. So I'm opening up some resource material. I have other resource material as well. But again, at the beginning of this book, or this project, I don't know if it's actually going to actually turn into a novel. I just want to rope in some of those consistencies in the Dryden Universe, especially talking with Geist Marines. And then what I've done is I have another document that I've started, people, places, and things for this particular storyline, because you have to be consistent within the story itself. So eventually this will all get fleshed out. People, places, and things. I'll pull. I've got like 4 or 5 of these other compendiums of information about my other stories, and I will pull the planets and whatnot, and the ships and the locations and things like the Defenders Division, which is responsible for Terra Corps' military. All that will get pulled out of my historic compendiums of information about the Dryden Universe, and they will get woven into this new book. And then they will all end up on this back sheet. And at the end of all my Dryden books, you will find a section, people, places, and things, where everything is listed out. In case, maybe you want to write a Dryden Universe novel. It just makes it easier. So let's get a little bit talking about the what I've written so far. So again, this is laissez-faire, creative writing. I just have a real general picture of what the story is. So I have a Terra Corporation Marine. So he's a regular Marine by the name of Ross Hannikin, and he wants to be a Geist Marine. So in my life experience, this would be like being a Ranger in the Army. It's a semi more elite type of training thing, but then wanting to go into something like Green Berets or Special Forces, and in this case, Geist Marines would be more like Special Forces, although it's really a combination of Green Berets and Special Forces in this Dryden Universe science fiction world. So, so what I'm doing, so really quickly, I have to introduce my main character, introduce his big desire, problem, whatever, and then so I'm setting the scene as quickly as I can. So, look, right up front, he wants to be a Geist Marine. It tells us to read a lot of things right off the bat. Oh, this is going to be a story about Ross Hannikin becoming a Geist Marine. Okay, I got it. That's in the first sentence. And then I've got to put some tension in there. So I tell a little bit about his history. He wanted to be a Geist ever since he was a little kid, and he saw a Terra Corporation video about Geist Marines. His mother wasn't happy about it because his father had been a Terror Corps Marine and had died after Ross had been born. I don't say how the guy died is not necessary. And then maybe that should have been a lesson, a warning. Maybe he should have listened to his mother. So you know there's some tension here in him. And what is that? Well, here it is, comes in a second. He's miserable. He's on a little ice moon, damned little ice moon, spinning about a dead planet. He has not been sleeping. He's having these little micro fall asleep episodes. He can't stay awake, but if he gets caught, he knows he's going to end his career before he ever gets become a Geist Marine. He'll get kicked out of the pre-selection course, and he just has to push himself for the next 48 hours to get it into the Geist Marine program. So you've already set this. He's exhausted. They're doing something, but he's miserable, and he's not sure it's even worth it. So there's tension right up front. So you have the main character's motivation right up front. You have a little bit of world building to bring people in quickly enough so if they haven't read another Dryden novel, they very quickly get a grasp of, maybe they don't know the history behind Terra Corporation, maybe they don't know the history behind Geist Marines, but they have enough information to go, okay, this guy's on a little moon and he's trying to join this Geist Marine thing, and that's probably some sort of elite unit, and it's kicking his backside. So all of that in what? How many words is that? Let's just check real quick here. 237 words. So now, one of the issues that I have with not just me, writers of science fiction and fantasy have, is they have to create the world. So sometimes you get these little pockets of pretty dense writing. This is dense writing. It's paragraphs that are giving you information and giving you background and all that stuff. It slows the story down. The reader's going through this slowly. So I give it a little bit of a break here, but I'm not done setting the scene or talking about introducing the character and introducing other characters. So if you notice, I spent quite a bit of time, what is that, before I have any more dialogue, I've got almost 3.5 pages, so 1,500 words. So what I've decided is that I know that's slowing it down. They need to have this information, though, to learn about the character and to start caring about him a little bit. And also they need to put in some information about the world that he lives in, the situation that he's in. So I start throwing in conversation because, I mean, just look at it physically. Look how dense that paragraph is, and look how light and empty these are. Okay? And what I'm doing is, if you go back and look at my dialogue on craft of writing, you'll see that I'm using all those tools here. I just want to explain it to you so you can kind of see it. So remember, there was action tagging, which is where you put an action either in front of what a character says or after what a character says to indicate who's speaking. So here is an action tag. Okay, I'm telling you, one of his instructors, a Geist Marine everyone called Grumps, appeared bouncing his helmet against Ross's. That's going to tell you who's going to say this. Get something to eat and get your shelter up. Cluster together. 360. Got it, recruit? Now, because it's a really soft introduction, it's a really soft action tag, there could be some confusion upon the reader about who's talking. So you know, I've told you, so this is a textual or a contextual tag, which I have not talked about. So you know that Ross is a recruit trying to get into, he's going through a pre-selection program for the Geist Marine. So when this character in this line of dialogue says, got it, recruit, I'm reinforcing this idea that this Geist Marine named Grumps is the person that's talking. And then I do a action tag and another indirect tag down here. Ross nodded, yes sir, to reinforce that message. So I've got an action tag. I've got a very, very soft contextual tag in here about who's talking, because you know who the recruit is. And then of course I've got the action tag, Ross nodded, yes sir, sir being the soft indirect tag telling you that the person that spoke up here was actually Grumpus. So the guy shoved Ross on his shoulders, Ross took a stone step back or two, and then the guy says, just checking. So I had to throw in some sort of conversation because you've just been reading all this heavy stuff. So this is very light reading. So this is how I'm controlling my pacing as a writer. And of course this is a draft. It's a draft. So I might go through and I might add some dialogue earlier to kind of speed up the introduction into the story. I may or may not do that. But so, and then I'm going to do a transition paragraph and I'm going to bring in some other characters. Now what I'm doing here is, again, I'm just speeding up the story because the reader's probably tired at this point of reading the dense paragraph. So I'm going to start off, here's an action tag. It's in the second position of the sentence. I could very easily move this to the first position. I could say Ilana Evans shoved him a bit. Come on, Hannigan. I could do that, but I chose to put it in the second position. Come on, Hannigan. Ilana Evans shoved him a bit. Get your kit together so we can all hook in and share some body warmth and eat. You haven't eaten all your food. Have you, Hannigan? So here's a soft tag telling you who's going to speak next. But if you know, in the military, people always use last names. So I'm kind of switching between using Ross's first name and his last name. So when I'm talking about Ross as doing an action or something, I'm saying Ross. But when other characters talk to him, I'm saying Hannigan. So that can be confusing as you're just getting into the story. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a very soft reinforcing that Ross Hannigan is the guy's name. So, and I'm doing it here. I'm having Elena say, have you, Hannigan? And this is where I do it. I give a action tag with Ross, and he's answering when she asks that question. What? No. Ross fumbled. There you go. Ross Hannigan. It's a very subtle way of reinforcing that guy's name. Remember, you just started this novel, right? And it can be confusing when you start doing dialogue. Now, the other thing I'm doing here is I'm setting up rhythm tagging. If you remember, I talked about rhythm tagging. So I've told you who's there. Ilana Evans is there, and Ross Hannigan is there. And they're speaking in, and I've set up a rhythm. Ilana's going to speak first, then followed by Ross. And I'm going to reinforce that a little bit by doing a direct tag right here. So I have 3, Ilana said. So when I get here, I can do a very small mini rhythm tagging. So you know, Ilana spoke here, so this has got to be who? It's got to be Ross, followed by Ilana, followed by Ross. So my rhythm tagging goes in, and look how clean and fast that is. So I've gone from this dense stuff like this to some less dense, faster stuff here, and I've thrown in some faster dialogue here, again, to control the pacing and to give some relief to the reader so that they can move on to a little bit more dense reading and some longer dialogue. Because you know, stories are really about characters. If you don't have characters communicating with each other, what type of story is that? So, okay, so now I'm doing something interesting in this paragraph with dialogue too. So now what you have, I have Ross is in the comfort of his shelter. He's taken off his boots. He's got this little light above him, so I've put him in a scene. And look what I'm doing. When he hears Grump's return. So this is a very soft way of using an indirect action tag to tell you who's going to speak next. Okay? And then I'm using an indirect action tag on a character we haven't met yet by having Grumps call out a name when he starts. And what this does is I'm introducing that rhythm tagging, and we're kind of listening through it through Ross's ears, and he knows these voices, so that you know who's speaking, and the rhythm tag kind of works out. So when he hears Grump's return, so Grump says, Rogers, you the squad leader today? And the person who answers is going to be who? It's going to be Rogers. It's not going to be Smith because he's he's calling for Rogers. That's how that little soft indirect tag works. Sir, yes sir. Ross could hear Rogers fumble out of his shelter. A logistics robot is dropping a heat pack for the night. It's going to get wicked cold. Storm coming in. Storm. Now this bit, I've set up the pattern, right? Rogers is going to speak followed by, Grumps is going to speak followed by Rogers. But this little bit here, to give you some context that Ross is just hearing this again, can confuse the reader. So when that pattern continues here, so you got Grumps saying a logistics robot is dropping a heat pack for the night, it's going to get wicked cold, and Rogers' response is storm. I'm going to do an indirect tag right here with Rogers to reinforce the pattern so that if the readers have gotten lost in that small transition, that it reinforces the Grumps is going to speak and then Rogers is going to speak so that the reader doesn't get lost. And what you notice in this area here, there's no action tags, there's no direct tagging, there's nothing. So again, that conversation just goes real fast, speeds up the pace of my story some. And it also builds in a little bit of stress because now you know, oh, it's a wicked storm coming in. And so the reader's thinking, well, what's that going to do, if anything? So I've done a lot of things in that little bit. But let's just look at this dialogue here. So a logistics robot is dropping a heat pack for the night. It's going to get wicked cold. Storm coming in. Storm. You do know what a storm is, don't you, Rogers? There's the indirect tag. Good. Not much time. Get your hook to the shelters and cover everyone with a thermal blanket. You know the drill. Yurt. If you don't know what a yurt is, look it up on the internet. It's a little tent. You'll have to get them all out of their cozy little holes and give you a hand. So again, this is a very, very soft indirect tag because you know that the Grumps is the senior person and he's given an order. So I'm reinforcing very, very subtly the pattern of speech. So you can figure out this is Grump who is speaking this. Can you manage it? Yes, sir. There's that soft indirect tag going back. Again, reinforcing who's speaking. The flyer will come out of grid west there. It will come in low. Yes, sir. Get him back up then. I'm passing the word up the line. And then I'm going to have Ross come back into the scene. And now I have, you know, when you do rhythm tagging, almost any dialogue really, one of the first tasks that you have to do is you have to explain who's in the scene. So we know Rogers is in the scene. We know Grumps just left. So Ross is cursing, slips back, puts on his battle helmet, checks his oxygen levels, and wiggles out into the night. So now you've got Rogers and Ross. And Ross makes his way to Rogers is standing. He looks west. And then Evans shows up. So now you know there's three people there. You've got Rogers, Ross, and Evans. So I've got to set up, they're going to talk to each other, so I got to set up a pattern of talk, and I've got to tag people. So this is how I do it. I do a direct tag right off the bat because it has to be very clear who out of the three are speaking. So best get everyone up. Rogers said, there are three of us. Ross replied, we can get it done. Do you think they are all asleep? Here's rhythm tagging because there's that pattern. Rogers, Ross. So that's Rogers, Ross. By the sound of it, yes. And then I'm doing something down here to bring the third character in and doing a very soft indirect tag by having Rogers ask Evans for her opinion, and that tells you that this person is going to be Evans. So the third person, and I don't have a direct tag. Look how clean these lines are. There's no he said, she said. It's very clean and very fast. So I set up a pattern very quickly, and I do that right here. When Rogers asks Evans, that's saying that Rogers is the first speaker, Evans is the second, and that goes all the way down to this bit here. So fast dialogue. Evans, Roger asked, fine with me, my food's still warming up. I'm starving, but I'm waiting to eat. Means I get to use a heat pack tonight. I'm all for it. I'd walk another 10K for someplace warm. I don't think I'll ever get warm again. That's the spirit, Rogers. There we go. In case the reader's confused, a very subtle indirect tag saying that this person who spoke was Rogers. That's the spirit, Rogers. Doom and gloom, great motivational pep talk. Fuck you, Evans. There you go, the indirect tag again. Kiss my ass. And then a direct tag because Ross interrupts himself into the conversation. There it is. Ross interrupted. See it? So, all right. Now down here, again, you'll see a very fast little dialogue blurb here. He and the two other Marines, he being Ross, he and the two other Marines crawled back the way they had come, and each of them made their way to their own shelters. Hold on, Hannigan. So you don't really know who's saying that because there's three people. So this is a little bit of a confusing bit. So I'm doing a couple things in here. I have a contextual context tag in here. It's very subtle. Earlier on in this story, as I've written it, Evans has offered Hannigan some extra food. She doesn't want to carry it, and he looks hungry. And so when I start talking about food in here, then you kind of know, oh, Ross must be talking to Evans because they're talking about the food that she promised him. So it's a very subtle way of tagging, and I reinforce it right here with the indirect tag. So hold on, Hannigan. This tells you Hannigan's going to speak next. What? I promised you some extra food. That soft contextual tag tells you, oh, that's probably Evans. She offered him some extra food. I reinforce that in the next line. Oh, yeah, thanks, Evans. No problem. And then Evans crawls off into her shelter, and she says, so this is kind of an action tag. Eat before you fall asleep. Thanks for the reminder, Ross said. Tonight is going to be a bitch. So you can see how I'm using all of these dialogue tools to kind of break up the dense world building paragraphs that I have to introduce the science fiction world for these readers. And I also use it to create a little bit of tension so you know you got a storm coming, etc. And also to help define what a Geist Marine is and how he looks and all that stuff. So in that way I've been able to create, up to this point, hopefully, a story that is balanced as far as speed of reading, and one that's giving you enough information but not overloading you with information about the situation and the universe that they're in. Now, what I haven't done up to this point, again, because this is all that exposition, these dense paragraphs, you know, if you remember the way the story is designed, you got exposition and inciting incident, and you got rising tension, and then you have the climax, and then the little drop at the end, and then you're done with the story. So this is all exposition in the first chapter of the story, if I continue to write it. So, you know, right off the bat in the first line of the first paragraph, you know he's trying to become a Geist Marine. By the time you get to the second paragraph, you know that he's in a pre-selection course and that he's miserable and he doesn't know if it's worth trying to fix it. And they're walking across this ice plain, but you don't know why necessarily what they're going to do. You know it's a training exercise. And so at some point I got to say, what are they doing? And this is what I like. When you have these dense type of paragraphs, and look at some of these sentences, like look at this sentence. So that's a long sentence, right? I mean that's a complex sentence. I think it's how many words? 53 words in one sentence. So I've done this long sentence up here, and I'm going to break it up with a short sentence here, and then I'm going to highlight what their unit's goal is by separating it in its own little paragraph. They were attacking an illegal space base. So again, this is a laissez-faire type of writing thing. So as I was writing this, I had to decide, well, what are they going to attack? What would Terra Corporation, who owns a chunk of space, send Geist Marines to go eliminate? And hey, how about an illegal base that's competing with them, maybe housing pirates, maybe doing illegal trade movement and stuff like that? Let's go take it out and take control of our space. So it's a realistic scenario for somebody who's a Terra Corporation Marine. And it's a realistic scenario for a Geist Marine to have to go and attack an illegal space base. I might call it a space station, but it's on the moon. again, it's a draft. I'm going to have to work on the wording a little bit. But now, so through this laissez-faire writing process, I have enough information in my own brain to start generally sketching in my head what's the story going to be about. So what I know is I have a recruit. He has to become a Geistmarine, right? So there's a chunk of the story. That's probably the first bit. How does he go through training? What's it like? When does he get the juice? What's it like becoming a Geistmarine? How does he feel about it? Whatever. And then obviously there's going to be an assignment afterwards. And then obviously after that there's going to be some sort of big assignment as the climax. He has to go do something big. So you have a structure of a novel already kind of developing in 7 pages worth of laissez-faire creative writing, where I basically don't even have an outline except this kernel of an idea in my brain. So what I'll probably do next is I'll probably start sketching the story out as that idea solidifies. So, you know, one of the things that I'm lacking in this story right now is internal tension. I've got tension with the mother who doesn't want to be in the Marines. I've got some tension with the environment. I've got some tension with going to become a Geistmarine. But for the character of Ross as a main character, what is his, what causes him internal tension, which eventually will be coupled to situation and whatever the inciting incident is that I decided has that propels the story forward. But that really is underlying motivation for the actions that he's going to take, which are still in the ether realm. So, but anyway, so what I thought I'd do is I would just, hopefully you can see kind of my thought process with writing. You don't see this very much on YouTube videos. Most people say, you know, excuse me, against the pollution. But most people on the videos will say things like, you know, my habits of a writer, you know, things that I don't. But again, they don't really get into the craft of writing. So this is just a way for me to take those earlier videos I did about how to do dialogue and whatnot, and kind of show you how that it's reflected in a draft story of mine called Guys. So anyway, so I'm going to have a writing episode this weekend because I've got 4 days off. Hopefully I work on the story some and I'll get to my sketch. And I appreciate y'all coming by. Don't forget to like and share my video. And if you have any questions about writing or just want to chat about whatever books you read, put it in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer you. And with all that said, I will see you all